Hello, subscribers. Time to get back to educating atheists, and for this episode, we go back to Logicked in a video where he claims one of Braxton Hunter's arguments is, quote, barely an argument. Well, since I don't know yet which argument he could be going after, I won't bother making a prediction, so let's get into it.
Well, in that case, I might as well just look at this shorty from 2018, and it's called God is the Best Explanation for Morality.
Is it really meaningful to say that kindness is a good thing?
Yes. The sentence is grammatically sound, it uses real words, it's being used to contain some kind of a meaning that's intended to be extracted from it. So in the very literal sense, yes. And if you mean it more in the sense of, is that sentiment significant to someone? Well, if you're saying it with sincerity, then presumably, yes. At least to you, even if you're on a desert island.
Is this one of those videos I'm gonna need to look at the transcript to follow? Oh, wait, I can't. There doesn't seem to be a transcript button. Well, let's continue, and hope Mr. Logicked gives a more direct answer rather than this pedantic runaround.
Really, is it true to say that kindness, love, benevolence are morally right things?
Well, it's true to say that people tend to consider those morally right. But of course, that's not what you mean. What you mean is it objectively true about reality beyond humanity? If all thinking entities were to disappear, would it still be true? In the same way that if all thinking entities were to disappear, physics would still work similarly. To which I would say, well, I don't really see how that would be the case. It seems like a reification of human preferences to me. And frankly, based on the way people talk about this, it really seems to be more of an emotional thing than a cool-headed observation of external, inhuman reality. So from my perspective, probably not. It doesn't seem like the simplest way at all of explaining the phenomenon of people thinking this, but I'm open to having my mind changed on this, which the rest of the video will do, presumably.
Really missing that transcript button right now. So all I got from that is just some incredulity, no real reason given as to why those things should not be objective. Let's continue.
Do we mean it when we say that kidnapping, murder, and abuse are morally wrong things?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure if I asked you, you would say that you do in fact mean that. And, you know, I believe you. I'll take that at face value. You could be lying, I guess, but I don't really care that much about what you personally think. I don't really have any particular interest in whether you actually think this or not. If you say you think it, I'll just go, okay, whatever. That's good enough for the purpose of conversing with you. And the likelihood is that you're probably just saying that because that's what you actually think. If it becomes more of a pressing issue to be more confident than that, then I'll think about other ways to verify what your actual opinion is then.
Way to have the point go right over your head. It should have been obvious to anyone that Braxton was using the royal we, as in we meaning everyone. Not we Christians, or we apologists, but we humans. So, not only are you not answering the rhetorical question, but you're responding to a straw man.
And are value statements helpful?
Helpful for accomplishing what? I mean, they're often helpful for social cohesion, for laying out your own position, for the purpose of discussion. It's interesting that that's apparently in question here. I mean, you're welcome to ask the question. It's just kind of surprising that you found the answer to be non-obvious, even from the perspective of someone who doesn't believe in objective morality.
I just don't know. Like, there was just too much intercutting for me to even follow that. I mean, that wasn't even 3 seconds of Braxton talking for that clip. It seems like Mr. Logicked is hearing but not listening. If you don't mind me being a little ironic here for a second, try not responding to every rhetorical question and let Braxton get to the point.
Who gets to decide?
Well, if it's objective, then it's not a matter of decision. In that case, people can decide whatever they want, but that doesn't change reality. If it's subjective, then of course it's easier to say somebody decides. But I also don't think we really decide what we perceive as wrong, or at least not as a matter of a simple, direct, immediate choice. You know, it's a matter of your feelings, it's a matter of your cultural influences, your experiences. It doesn't really seem possible to just change all that instantly on a whim. It can be done with a concerted effort over a prolonged period of time, and certain methods of convincing yourself. So in that sense, maybe you could say you can decide this, but it's not a simple thing. Now, in the universe as I understand it to work, that's pretty much the end of that. In a universe where Christianity is true, you could say that God decides what's objectively good or bad, in the same way he decides what the laws of physics objectively are, but a lot of Christians kind of undermine this by saying that morality is a part of God's nature. They'll say things like, God must punish sin because perfect justice is part of his nature which just simply is necessarily as it is, and which he can't go against. But that implies that God doesn't actually decide what's good and bad. That's defined for him by his nature. He's a slave to the reality of whatever he is. So which moral system he implements is pretty much dictated for him by the reality of what it is to be God at all. I don't know if you're one of these morality comes from God's nature people. I would guess you probably are, but I could be wrong.
Okay, here seems to be some meat of the argument. It almost seemed like he was going to try and claim that if God decides what's right and wrong, then morality is subjective. Good to see he didn't make that mistake, though if he did, I do already have a video answering that claim. So his real point seems to be the idea that morality comes from God's nature somehow doesn't work. And I think it does work, but it depends on what you mean by his nature. If by nature you mean his unchanging personality, his likes, which he will always like, his dislikes, which he will always dislike, then it works just fine. However, if by nature you mean something more nebulous that I can't even define, then no, I would say that is unhelpful.
Obviously, morality is real, and we all have emotional reactions to the kinds of things I've just been talking about because we all realize that it's real.
Well, sure, morality is real. Morality is basically a summation of human responses to certain things in terms of, I think everyone should act like that, and I don't think anyone should act like that, which, yes, is primarily driven by the strong emotional response. The strong emotional response makes this a very easily identifiable phenomenon within the human mind. It tends not to be all that subtle. It tends to be a very obvious thing, which manifests very clearly, which is why the social phenomena that result from it tend to be pretty hard to miss. So we're not disagreeing about whether morality is real as a human phenomenon. We're in complete agreement on that. What we disagree about is whether the particulars of it, the specific rules that people think should be followed, come from people or from some objective inhuman feature of the cosmos.
Actually, no, we are not really agreeing. Sure, you claim morality is real, but if what you call morality is subjective, then it is not real. Morality, by definition, must be objective. In order to say something is wrong without it just being your opinion, then you must have an objective reason. Subjective morality is an oxymoron.
But what you may not have realized is that in the absence of God, morality is just kind of a fiction.
Well, no, I don't think that really has anything to do with God. If something is objectively true about reality, then it's true regardless of whether a God put it there or whether it got there by any other means. Maybe you would say it's difficult to explain if a God didn't put it there, but you guys say that about everything. Difficult to explain or unexplained are not synonymous with impossible to explain. But I'm not one of those objective morality atheists. I'm not going to defend their position. I don't think their position is true. I just don't think it's impossible for it to be true simply on the basis of there not being a God. Not if it's possible for the correctness of moral rules to be really, really objectively real.
I guess that's technically true, at least in theory. But just because it's technically true does not mean it's rational. This is a very non-committal fence-sitter type of answer that really just avoids the problem.
Without God, it doesn't exist.
Disagree, but I do think this objectively correct morality doesn't exist. I think it's just a thing humans do. That seems to me like by far the most likely and believable explanation. To me, that explains the facts far better than any of this objective morality stuff. And if somehow it is real, it doesn't seem to have much, if any, influence on human action. Humans act very much as if they just make it up as they go along, and I include Christians in this. Now again, I could be wrong. I'm not declaring certainty about this. I'm just saying that based on my understanding of how the world works, it seems more likely than not to me that this is how it is. Perhaps I'll be convinced otherwise someday, who knows? I don't have a lot of interest in certainty.
I'm feeling a Bible verse coming on.
I know thy works, that thou art neither cold nor hot. I would thou wert cold or hot. So then, because thou art lukewarm, and neither cold nor hot, I will spew thee out of my mouth.
At least if you had cared more about a strong position one way or the other, then I could make a strong response. But this week, I don't care about certainty. Fence-sitting nonsense just makes you someone to ignore. If you don't have a position on the topic, then why are you wasting everyone's time with a response video?
Premise 1. If God does not exist, then objective moral values and duties do not exist.
Yeah, but again, this premise is kind of like saying if God does not exist, then laws of physics don't exist. Or if God does not exist, then life can't exist. It's pointing to a supposedly objective, identifiable feature of external reality and saying God did that thing because I said so. It's a terrible argument just like those other ones. It's, therefore God, just like the other ones. The only difference for me in this case is that I don't think objective morality is a feature of external reality. People think it is, but to me that seems like a figment of the human imagination. But if it were somehow part of the structure of reality, I'm not going to say you can just claim it for God by default because you personally can't think of another explanation. That's not an argument. And spoiler, you're not going to argue for this at all. You're not going to try to justify this premise. This is just taken for granted. Well, I don't grant it. It's not going to be that easy, so we can strike that one out.
That was a lot of words to say, you don't accept the first premise, but I didn't hear any reason as to why the first premise fails. What I did see is you using things you accept as objective to try and compare them to something you think is subjective in order to call it a bad argument. You basically accepted the second premise before even hearing it in order to call the first premise bad. But of course, it still doesn't follow that. Just because you can replace morality with life or laws of physics and make it a bad argument doesn't mean it's a bad argument. There is also another fallacy that Mr. Logicked is making here. I'm not sure of the specific name of it, but it goes like, I don't like your answer because it doesn't take into consideration some other position that I do not hold myself. Or, something like that. And it's worse than that, because he can't even name the position he thinks is a defeater for the premise. He only says that some atheists claim objective morality, but makes no attempt to explain how they do that, or if it's at all rational. Now, if you want more justification for the premise, then you will want to find a video of William Lane Craig making the argument, as I am sure it is where Braxton got this specific formulation of the argument.
Premise 2. But objective moral values and duties do exist.
Another assertion and another premise that is to remain completely unjustified. And this one, of course, I disagree with. That's clear already. And to be honest with you, it's not even just that I don't believe the claim. It's that I don't really find the claim comprehensible. I don't really understand what the hell this would even mean in actual reality, which is a big reason why I don't find it any more absurd that this would be true without a god than that it would be true with one. Anytime I hear someone asserting this, whether they're an atheist or a theist, it sounds to me pretty much like they're just saying nonsense. From my perspective, saying moral claims are factually true is something like saying the number 2 smells purple. Why? What is that supposed to mean? You're giving something a property that doesn't apply to it. Maybe you have some kind of moral analog to synesthesia that makes this make sense to you. But if so, I don't get it. What I could really use is somebody who tries to explain clearly what it would mean for murder is wrongness to be baked into reality, to be a real property of things. What is murder is wrongness? How is it stored? How is it implemented into the reality? How can it be detected beyond people have a subjective emotional reaction to stuff, which has to be possible because otherwise we're again just talking about subjective morality.
First of all, everybody knows that the number 2 smells like blue, not purple. Those 3D sunglasses are probably just messing with your color sense. Anyway, this premise was justified earlier in the video. You just weren't listening. Without an objective standard, then there is no such thing as morality. As for your last point, morality is an abstract just like numbers and math, or laws of logic. You could probably ask the same question about laws of logic that you're asking about morality. But you don't conclude laws of logic are subjective now, do you? Also, you begged the question at the end there. We are not talking about subjective morality, because that's not a thing any more than a square circle.
Someone could always respond by saying, says who?
Sure. People could respond with all kinds of stuff. Why would someone respond with that in particular? Especially if the question is, why do you think that's objectively wrong? Says who would be exactly the wrong question to ask. That's asking what subject holds that opinion. That's nothing to do with objectivity.
Maybe you should think about that for a second. You say that it's a question about subjectivity, but you believe morality is subjective. So how is it the wrong question? Says who is the ultimate question of morality that everyone must answer, because morality is conceptual in nature, and therefore must come from a mind. And appealing to anybody less than God just leads to morality being subjective, and thus not real. So the only real answer you can give to says who is says God.
This means that we should spend some time talking about the difference between subjective things and objective things.
Okay, good, never mind. So you're going to explain why says who is the wrong question. Cool.
To put it bluntly, think of subjective things as matters of opinion, like whether or not chocolate or vanilla ice cream is the best flavor of ice cream.
All right. So is it your opinion that people should not torture babies for fun? I mean, even if it's objectively true that that is the case, in some weird, difficult to quantify sense of some fundamental nature of things, if it's not your subjective opinion as well, then you don't think it's true, and then it has no impact on your behavior. Your opinions are what drive your behavior, and the emotions you feel based on those opinions even more so. People aren't sitting there coldly analyzing the objective reality of the correctness of their emotions before they decide that to feel those emotions would be accurate, and so I shall now proceed to feel them, which is why it really doesn't make any difference if it's objectively true or not, that something is wrong in some cosmic sense, if people already don't like it and don't want it to happen. The emotional reactions people have that you mentioned before, their subjective opinions, are already sufficient to explain the state of things. They're what determine how people actually act. All this objective morality stuff is good for is arguing about the philosophy of it. It's not needed to explain human action. It has seemingly no relevance to understanding how individuals or societies work. At least none that I can discern, and somehow I don't think you're really going to help me out with that.
A transcript. A transcript. My kingdom for a transcript. That tangent just came out of nowhere. Are you saying that I'm not allowed to have an opinion about objective facts? Because unless you are, I really don't see the point of all that. Something can be objectively right or wrong regardless of my opinion.
These seem to be matters of opinion. There isn't really a right or wrong answer, it wouldn't seem. On the other hand, objective things are matters of fact, such as 2 + 2 = 4.
Sure, but what was the impact of that fact on your behavior before you also picked up the opinion that it was true? If you have some emotional response to 2 + 2 = 4, is that based on the objective fact that 2 + 2 is 4? Or is that based on you thinking that 2 + 2 is 4? What if you thought 2 + 2 was 7? Would it become impossible to have a similar emotional reaction to that just because it's not objectively true? What if you have an emotional reaction to a question with no right or wrong answer at all? You brought up the example of ice cream flavor preferences, so you're aware that that's possible. What if you think that your preference must be objectively correct because it's your preference? Because it bothers you emotionally when someone goes against it? Because you just know that you're right. You know that your preference is as true as 2 + 2 = 4. Well, whether you're right or wrong, that opinion will affect your behavior. And the reality or unreality of the objective correctness of your ice cream preference really won't have a lot to do with the outcome, because there's no clear way to link that preference to the reality or the lack thereof. All you have are your feelings.
So moral facts are about what people should do or ought to do, not what they will do. So I'm sensing some sort of equivocation here.
Even if it was the opinion of every person on planet Earth that 2 + 2 = 7, 2 + 2 would still equal 4. They'd just all be wrong.
That's true, yeah. And it could be the subjective opinion of everyone on the planet that it's wrong to torture babies for fun. They could have a strong emotional reaction to it because they're all sure that that's absolutely wrong. They feel certain that objective reality agrees. And yet they could be wrong. Maybe that's not the objective morality at all. Maybe there is an objective morality and it's not that. Maybe, in fact, that's actually the right thing to do, but without some way to access that information and to validate that that is, in fact, the case, that doesn't have a whole lot of impact on the world. And maybe in this particular case, we're quite happy about that. And you might say, well, your conscience is the way to access that information. Yeah, says you, but that conscience could just as well be completely detached from reality, or rigged to indicate the opposite of reality. But that wouldn't really have an impact, would it? In this situation, thanks to the power of subjective opinion to influence real-world outcomes, the world looks just like ours. And you know, I'm not really trying to say much with this. I'm not trying to say, like, disbelieve everything. Think of everything as if you might be in the Matrix. Total solipsism. Although, of course, you know, it doesn't hurt to have that thought in the back of your head somewhere. All I'm really trying to drive at is this attitude that Christians sometimes seem to have when they talk about this, that subjective morality is somehow trivial, lacking impact, lacking the ability to manifest the human social world as we experience it, is really just kind of silly. Human opinion is profoundly effective as a driving social force.
So Mr. Logicked's argument boils down to, but what if you're wrong? What if everyone's conscience is wrong and it is objectively good to torture babies? Well, there's a book that could help with that, but I'm sure if I brought that up as an answer, I'd be accused of begging the question. But what we can do is look at that example again. If everyone thinks 2 + 2 = 7, then everyone would be objectively wrong. But in this hypothetical, why does everyone think 2 + 2 = 7? A person could be wrong, but still be rational in their answer. It's hard to imagine being rational about 2 + 2 being 7, but it's not hard to see that even if we are wrong about morality being objective, it is still the rational position. Example, what if the flat earthers were right and Earth really was flat? We would still be rational with our current information, such as all other planets being round, to believe the Earth is round. Of course, even still, subjective morality is an oxymoron. It makes zero sense to claim something as subjectively right or wrong.
Now, I think we all know that morality isn't really so much a matter of opinion.
Well, no, to affect human behavior, it has to be that too. If it's not, then it's completely pointless. It has no impact at all. I guess at least until you get tossed into hell or whatever you think. But yes, I understand that you believe there's an objective basis for that opinion. Wonderful. Again, how do you know that? How have you established this? It's not enough to just say we all know it's true. No, we don't. I don't know that. Many, many people agree with me, not with you. We don't all just know it. This is why you make arguments for things. If you want my opinion to match your opinion about what's objectively true, you're gonna have to do something to make that happen.
You're really just spitting in the wind here. You don't actually live like morality is subjective, so when you say you don't believe it's objective, you're really just being a hypocrite. It's pretty much impossible for anyone to live as though morality were subjective. Maybe if you're a psychopath or something, but that's a big if and only confirms something is wrong with you.
Whether or not it's okay to torture babies just for the fun of it is not some obscure, abstract conundrum. It's wrong. We all know it's wrong. It's objectively wrong.
We all feel it's wrong. We all have a strong emotional reaction to it. We all have the subjective opinion that it's wrong. And yes, many of us feel that we know that it's wrong, but that doesn't mean we do. You don't get a free pass from I feel it to therefore this reflects objective reality beyond humans. Why do you think people are going to grant the truth of that very significant major claim about the nature of reality on the sole basis that there's a thing that lots of people don't like other people doing? Like, yeah, great, humans have instincts to care for our young. How does that validate your vast metaphysical proposition?
You know, this argument could be used for anything. You feel like other people exist, but you don't know it. That is not rational. You cannot just counter an argument by saying, well, we all feel that way, but that doesn't make it true. This fallacy probably stems from you not taking a stronger position on the matter.
It's not wrong in the way that I think you're wrong if you think vanilla ice cream is the best flavor. It's wrong like 2 + 2 = 7 is wrong.
That it contains a logical contradiction? Okay, what is the logical contradiction in that action? And if there is one, then how is the action even occurring?
2 + 2 = 7 is not a logical contradiction. It is just wrong. Saying 2 + 2 = both 4 and 7, now that would be a contradiction.
But in order for that to be true, then God must exist as the objective grounding for that morality.
Why?
If God exists, we have an answer to the question, says who?
Wait a second. I thought the point of going through all that subjective and objective stuff was to point out that the question says who is the wrong question, because that'll just point to the opinion of another subject.
No, that was your argument. Can you not even keep your own argument straight?
It would still be wrong because people's opinions about it wouldn't matter.
Really? Okay, but the entire basis of your argument that morality is in fact objective is that people have opinions about it. We all just know it's wrong. We have strong reactions to it because it's wrong, and that establishes which morality is true. But now all of a sudden, apparently that doesn't apply.
Braxton did not appeal to everybody's opinion. That is an equivocation. He appealed to intuition, which is not the same thing. Ironically, Mr. Logicked probably needs to respond to his own video, because when Braxton claims that God is the best explanation for morality, he justified it beforehand with his argument, and Mr. Logicked claims he didn't. But when Mr. Logicked claims personal opinions are the best explanation for morality, he doesn't feel the need to justify that claim. People in glass houses and all.